Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey guys, it's Adam here, and today we're going to be talking about a bunch of video games I picked up at a store called Hard Off in July of 2024 in Japan. Before we do that though, if you guys could do me a favor, please like this video, comment down below, subscribe if you've never done that before, as well as check out all the social media stuff in the description. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon, Spreadshirt, my travel channel, etc. I appreciate the support so much. Thank you so much for watching. Let's get on with it. Now, so if you're unfamiliar, if you've never seen any of these type of videos, Hard Off, and I know people always laugh at that name because you can't help it, but although I will submit that Hard Off is not the funniest name in that series because there's Book Off, there's Mode Off, there's House Off, there's even Garage Off. My favorite one is Liquor Off. Just saying, it sounds funnier. But it's a hardware store, kind of like, that sells used electronics and devices, but they also sell a lot of video games, which is stuff I care about. Now, very recently, not only was I in Japan, I even more recently did a video kind of doing the adventure of going to a whole bunch of Hard Offs. Now, I've been doing that for years. Every time I get the chance to go to Japan, if there's time and ability to do so, I go to as many of these Hard Off stores as I possibly can. And I pick up stuff that is of interest to me. Now, of course, diminishing returns as time is going on. There's less and less things you need. I don't really buy stuff unless it's actually something I want for my collection for whatever reason. That said, I still did pretty well. There's some stuff off to the side that you're going to see. I hope you guys enjoyed that adventure video, by the way. And if you missed it, go check it out because you'll see a lot of cool stuff in that. It's pretty funny as well. And if you like that general vibe, keep in mind I have a travel channel that's entirely like that. And there will also be more videos, the Suragaya adventure video, which is another chain of stores, as well as all the pickups that are going to come from that. So, this is just the stuff that came specifically from various Hard Off stores on that particular trip. So let's get into it. Now, one of the things Hard Off is best known for is their junk section. Now, the Japanese definition of junk is a tad different than ours. They pretty much just say, like, there's the slightest problem with it, either cosmetically, or, like, you know, they don't see a point to it, or it's missing the power cable, something basic like that, and they just consider it junk because they don't want to deal with it. Now, when they make it junk, that also means that they're saying, we won't accept returns on this, etc. This is your problem now. So if you're even remotely competent as far as maybe cleaning or maintaining a video game console or something like that, you're probably going to get good stuff there. They also, of course, have stuff in nicer sections, but the junk sections can be kind of interesting to dig through. I will preface this, by the way. As you can see, a little bit of diminishing returns as far as the amount of content I got, but keep in mind that a couple of things have changed. Well, one, as I said, I've been doing this for a long time, so there's only so many things that I'm going to actually eventually want to get or can find that are reasonable enough for me to do. Two, the Japanese have kind of figured out that Baka Gaijin, aka Stupid Foreigner, such as myself, wants video games. So they went from this is garbage, literally, in the junk section where we just think all video games are like, you know, 100 yen, which used to be about $1. To like, oh wait, they're willing to pay us money for this? Let's put it out on the shelf and polish it up a little bit and we'll charge 5,000 yen, which used to be about $50. They're figuring out what retro games are, and in some places it's actually really stupid because they're like, all retro video games are worth money. So, oh, Mario Brothers on Famicom, that's $100 now. Like, you know, some of them, they don't really, especially in places like Akihabara. Don't ever go there, by the way. So yeah, it can be a mixed bag. That said, there's still bargains to be found, and at the time I'm making this video and the time I was over there, the Japanese yen compared to the US dollar has really tanked. Ideally for them, it used to be about 100 yen to $1. So you can think of 1 yen as 1 cent if you're an American. Then, because of the way their tax system worked, they liked it at, they had 8% sales tax. So they're like 108. 108 yen to $1, that's ideal. Then they raised their tax rate to 10%, so it became 110 yen to $1 was ideal. But inflation, and they've been having problems with that. At the time I was there, it was about 160 yen to $1. So the best way to think about that is, everything is basically 40% off. So then you're doing this juggling act between they're inflating prices, but you still get this massive discount. So the ideal scenario is you find a place that hasn't yet inflated its prices and you're still getting that giant 40% off discount effectively, again, from an American perspective. Now, with all that out of the way, let's get into what I actually picked up. From the junk section, I was just kind of thumbing through and I found a bunch of Game Boy cases, like, you know, original Game Boy plastic cases. Nothing really special about these. They're about 100 yen each. So these are about 60, 65 cents a piece. Now, I didn't know if I really need these, but, like, you never know. Like, sometimes you pick up Game Boy games. It's just kind of nice to have some spare cases. Like, I'm never going to get them cheaper than that, but not anything super exciting. But speaking of Game Boy, I did pick up a single Game Boy game, original Game Boy. This is a Godzilla game. I don't remember the full title. I'll put it there on the screen. There is a version of this that was released in North America, and from what I can tell, though, this was an updated version with some changes and whatever that was exclusive to Japan. And it was only like $2 equivalency, so I was like, whatever, you know, I'll get a new Game Boy game. Game Boy is a system I almost never pick anything up for, and I was partially inspired because I just bought all these cases. So now that I have all these cases and I have this game, look at that. Ooh, I almost dropped it. That's hilarious because that's the whole point of having the case, is to protect it from idiots from Baka Gaijin like me who would drop it. So, yes, anyway, there's that. Another thing I found in the junk bin, because I didn't find a whole lot of junk bin stuff this time. There's one other thing off screen, we'll get to that. But the other junk bin thing I got was just a Dreamcast VMU. You don't usually see these in the junk bins, and when they say junk, again, I can't stress this enough, there's actually nothing wrong with this. It's just like missing the cap part, so they consider it garbage. And so this was basically the equivalency of maybe like $1.50, something like that. Oh no, this was about 100 yen. So this is about 60 cents as well, something like that. I thought it for a second, I thought it was 500 yen. No, it was like 100 yen. So basically, I was like, look, I don't need another VMU. I got tons of them. But, like, I'm just, at that point, you're just kind of rescuing it from destruction. Because eventually that's what they do in the junk bins, is they literally just throw all that stuff away. So I was like, for 60 cents, I'm willing to save a VMU. That's not a big deal. And you can always use them more. Like, they're region-free, etc. Pop them into a Dreamcast controller, and yeah, you're on your way. Speaking of Dreamcast controllers, I picked one up, which might seem like, oh, who cares? This one is actually kind of interesting. This is not an official one. Take a look at this. It's by a company called Topway. It's not by Sega, but it's mostly using the original molding of the Dreamcast controller with some obvious differences. On the front, you can see that it's got two additional buttons. It's got a slow button and a turbo button. The thumbstick is also a little different. I don't know how to describe it. It's like the little impressions that are on the thumbstick are oddly stronger and more textured than they normally are, and there's a click to it. You can push down on it, which I can't imagine has any functionality, but hey, it's a thing. On the back, there's some additional grooves for your hands. It obviously doesn't have the Sega markings back here on the rear, and it obviously is missing the Dreamcast logo. It was cheap. It was basically like $10, if something like that, and so I was like, I love my Dreamcast oddities, and this is by a company I've never heard of. It's a strange variation of a Dreamcast controller. Is it the way to play the Dreamcast? Certainly not. But just for, honestly, console preservation purposes, probably never going to see this again. So I was like, why not? I'll get some, stupid junk. But I did get actually one nice Dreamcast item, something I had wanted for a long time, but I didn't really think I was going to have. This was behind glass at a hard off. Like I said, they're not all junk sections. They have nice sections too. I would say they have the junk section, they have like the medium section, and then they have the glass cases with the nice stuff. This was in the glass case. This is the Sega Gaga Edition VMU. Now, if you're not familiar, Sega Gaga was a game, an RPG, made by Sega exclusively for the Dreamcast towards the tail end of its life. Turn-based RPG that remains to this day exclusive to the Dreamcast and exclusive to Japan. The basic premise of it is Sega as a corporation is going up head-to-head against another corporation who clearly is meant to be Sony, even though they don't call them that, but it's obvious that that's the premise. And that Sony is basically this evil conglomerate trying to take over the world, and Sega is the resistance fighter that's trying to stop that from happening. To this day, that game is still one of the most desired games to get translated into English, and the fan community has been having an awful time trying to accomplish that. Regardless, when the game came out, they did a few different random tie-ins with it, different promotional items. This was one of them. I believe this was only sold on Sega Direct, which was Sega's equivalency of Club Nintendo, but I'm not totally sure about that. It has this nice box, and as you'll see, it's got a big picture of the Mega Drive, aka the Genesis, on it. So when you open it up, what actually is it? Inside, it's actually just a VMU. This VMU is brand new. It still has the thing in the back. It's never been used. And it's basically just meant to look like a Mega Drive. It's got the little cap and everything, which is very cool. And instead of saying 16-bit on it, says 8-bit, which the VMU is not 8-bit. But it's still just interesting that they put that on there. So it's really just, if you're into VMU collecting, I know this is one of the harder ones to get. And it was because of the exchange rate and not having to pay sales tax, which is often a thing for tourists in Japan, you often don't have to pay the sales tax. That's not guaranteed, not every time. But in this case, I didn't have to, which is a nice savings. It's an additional 10% off. This ended up being about like $50, which for that is a really good deal, especially in the box. So I was very happy with that. Oh, I almost dropped it. See, again, that's what these cases are for. Okay, moving on. Very cool. I'll put it away later. I also got some games, of course. PlayStation 2 stuff. We'll start with that. I don't typically buy a whole lot of PlayStation 2 content in Japan because with the PlayStation 2, I typically just go for what I consider to be the better games, the exclusive games, mostly because the 6th gen, it's one of that era. I typically prefer to play my games either on the Xbox, the Dreamcast, or the GameCube. Not so much the new one, but just mostly that has to do with not any distaste for the PS2. It's just that typically the other systems' versions of the games were better. And as time has gone on, especially the video output of the PlayStation 2 is horrific. So if I can get the game on a or a system that had more future-proofing, that's typically what I do. That said, the PlayStation 2's library was so ridiculously vast that it has so many exclusive games that you're either playing it on there or you're never playing it at all, which means you're still going to end up with this ridiculous collection of content. When I go to Europe, I often like to pick up PS2 games because they had some hilarious garbage over there. But the Japanese stuff, they had tons of stuff. But the thing is, their garbage is too hard to get into because there's so much of it. And I can't pretend to even begin to understand any of it anyway because I cannot speak or read Japanese. So I really just focus on games I might actually play or that they have some sort of interesting story to them. So the first to hit that criteria on this list was Melty Blood Actress Again. This is a fighting game. It's actually a pretty good one. Melty Blood series, I know some of them have come out here, not all of them. There were, I think, like 3 on the PS2, and this is one of them. It's just a fighting game. Now, this is the limited edition version of it, which is interesting, actually, because you will find this is a common thing if you ever go to Japan. Often the collector's editions or limited editions of games are actually cheaper than the regular edition. Like, if you open this up, the regular edition is inside here. This is just the stock regular version. And aside from that case, it also comes with an extra bonus case that's really just the music CD, the Melty Blood soundtrack. But the reason for that is typically the space the collector's edition takes is more valuable than actually the potential benefit of the music CD and the extra case. In other words, they had this and the stock version. They charged about half for this. So I was like, yeah, I'll just get that version. That's totally fine. I got more space. That's okay. I'm not Japanese. I've got some shelves. I'll be all right. But yeah, so I picked that one up. That's just a cool game. Next one up violates one of my collecting rules, but you'll understand why. There is a horror game on the PlayStation 2 that is supposed to be very good that never came out in North America. And to this day, I believe it lives and dies on the PlayStation 2. It's exclusively released on it. I don't think it's ever been reissued on anything. It only came out in Japan and Europe. It never came out in North America. Now, my normal collecting rules would be, if that's the situation, I want the European version just because it has a far superior chance of being in English. And that, of course, is the case. That game is called Michigan, as in the state of Michigan. In fact, the premise of this game is a horror game. I love my survival horror games. That is about a crew of people, I believe, from Michigan that are actually traveling to Chicago, my town where I am right now, where I live. And there's like some sort of horror event going on, and they're investigating it as a camera crew, and then a whole bunch of stuff goes down. And I was like, that's such a cool premise for a game. I really want that. But the game came out in Europe. I'd rather get the European version. I think in Europe it's called, I know I'm consolidating all the European continent as if it's a single country. I know better. I know it's not. So I don't know which countries it particularly came out. I know it definitely came out in the UK for sure, but mainland Europe, I'm not entirely certain. But either way, it came out in the European region, and that version does contain English. And I was like, I'd much rather have that. But I've never seen it over there. So I decided, once I found it in Japan, I've seen it several times, I was like, it keeps calling at me. You ever been into a store and you keep seeing the same game multiple times and you're just like, something's calling at me here? So I decided to look up the European version for the first time in a while, because I was like, I've never seen it in person. What would it actually cost me to get it? I'm willing to pay more for it than the Japanese version just because I know that there's going to be, you know, a sunken cost to the fact that it's inconvenient, that it's translated and all that sort of thing. But what is it? Yeah, the European version of this game is like $1,000 game. This was $30. So my basic mentality is it violates my rule to get the Japanese version, but you can understand why. So basically, I can't play this version. I tried. It's all Japanese. So what I'm going to do is it's cool to have on the shelf. I've got it, whatever. And if I'm totally honest with you, I'll probably try to find on the high seas of the internet the European version and then pop that onto like a hacked PS3 or whatever and be able to play it that way. And this one's just like, yeah, I've got it, but I'm going to play that version. You understand what I'm saying? So there you go. The next one up is also something I normally would not do. I got the Japanese copy of Rez for the PlayStation 2. Now, the reason I say I wouldn't normally do that is, well, the game did come out here. It came out on the PS2 in North America. In fact, I have it. So why did I bother with this? Okay, this requires a story and a bit of a stretch of the imagination. So bear with me. If you've never heard of Rez, or even if you have, it is kind of infamous as a really good game, but also a very bizarre one, known for the creator of the game also being a little off his rocker, at least so the story goes. What I'm about to tell you is unverified information. I've read it multiple times over the course of my life, and could just be right up there as an old wives' tale. So, disclaimer, what I'm saying is not verified. It is rumor mill. It is what I have heard a bunch of times. We're going to tell a story right now that may or may not be true. Okay. So Rez was originally developed for the Dreamcast as this, like, basically shooter from a third-person perspective where you're like this floating figure that you're just kind of shooting at stuff and there's colors flying at you. Supposedly, the developer of the game enjoyed his psychedelics, let's say, and he made the game, supposedly, LSD compatible. As in the drug. As in, if you take LSD and play Rez, the game will be an expanded experience by design. So the story goes. So that's the level of weird we're talking about here. Again, unsubstantiated. But oddly enough, this version of the game lends some credibility to that, let's call it a rumor. So when they reissued the game after Dreamcast, they decided to put it on PS2 because that, frankly, was where the money was. So here's how this story goes. They released the PS2 version in North America as just a standalone release. In Japan, they also released it as a standalone version, but then they did I don't know if it came out at the same time or if it was a reissue or exactly what happened, but they did this version. This is the Rez Special Package that includes in it what they call the Trance Vibrator, a specific device created specifically for this game. It is this device, a USB cable on one end and this little box called the Trance Vibrator. Okay? Now, how do I even explain this? The story goes that, at least what I've heard, again, full disclosure, disclaimer time, that Rez did not appeal to women. And that the creator of it wanted to do something to fix that. He also wanted to have a game that in some way, like a guy could play with his girlfriend or his wife or whatever near him, and they're both getting something out of it. So, as you can imagine, this is not a controller. This is not something, there's no interactivity on this device. It's just a little, looks like a mouse, like a computer mouse almost, and it just vibrates at specific times in the game. Now you might be thinking, the PS2 controller already vibrates. Like, what would you put this on your head or something? Like, what do you do with this? Well, if the story is to be believed, if the user is a male and they're playing the game, they are supposed to hand this over to their lady friend to put in a very specific area so that they too can enjoy the game at very particular moments. Or if the player is female, they themselves put it in a very particular area so that the game has an enhanced experience. You know what I'm saying. So that is the story. And thus far, I've never seen anybody who could verify that wasn't true, just because it doesn't seem to serve any other practical purpose. And I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute, if that's true, and this is used, doesn't that mean, yeah, probably. But don't worry, I decided to use hand sanitizer wipes and things on it. So I wanted to get it because I'm like, if there's any credibility to that, that is insane. And that is exactly the kind of thing that's why I love Sega. That's the exact type of thing that they would do. Hey guys, post-production Adam here. I was filming these coverage shots, and inside the res package I noticed this. This is a little foam protection for the trance vibrator. It's still factory sealed, which is kind of nice, I suppose. I'm going to just say, let's consider this evidence of that story. So moving on from that madness, going to somewhat normalcy, I like to collect other oddball things for systems I enjoy. Specifically, I like things like demo discs and promotional materials sometimes, particularly for consoles I have like a little bit of a passion for more so than others, because obviously you're not going to have the same passion for every single platform. So with the GameCube in Japan, I've narrowed it down to only 3 games I still need that are exclusive over there, and I'm just going to spoil it. I didn't find any of them. But I did find a few demo discs. Now, I like collecting demo discs because, frankly, they're cheap, they're interesting, and nobody really cares about them, so typically they're just kind of laying there. And you can pick them up and just find this kind of oddity that looks cool in a collection. But, I mean, that's really all they are. But considering they usually only cost like $1 or $2 or something like that, that's fine. So I found one, and it was one that I ended up kind of regretting. This is Resident Evil, well, more accurately, Biohazard Zero Trial Edition. So it's basically Resident Evil Zero as a demo disc. I'm not actually sure this is even playable. I think it might just be like cutscenes and stuff. It might be playable. Honestly, I don't know. I haven't really had a chance to actually investigate that. Also known as the not for resale version, which basically is their way of saying a demo disc. Now, the reason I kind of regret it is this was a perfect scenario of like, oh man, I've never seen that before, and it's, you know, cheap. I think this one was like $5. We're not talking a lot of money here. But the case was kind of cracked, and I'm like, yeah, I'm still gonna get it. And as soon as I got it, I started seeing it at a bunch of stores after that, usually for like $2 or $3. So not like I lost a lot of money, but honestly, I got the one that was a little more expensive and in worse shape. That was one where you didn't quite win. But, you know, whatever. It's not that big of a deal. So there it is. That said, I also found some really cool ones. I got a bunch of original Xbox demos, and I actually want to ask you guys your opinion on this. So first, let me explain the premise. The Japanese no longer do this, but they did a lot at the time. You will find that Japan did a lot of demo discs for game consoles. And it was very common, apparently, in a lot of situations that if you were in Japan and you were either buying a console or if you were buying one particular game or if you were pre-ordering a game or something like that, they would give you a demo disc of a totally different game just to kind of hook you in. And with the original Xbox, Microsoft, contrary to the popular belief, Microsoft really did try with the original Xbox in Japan. They pumped a lot of money into it to try and appeal to the Japanese. But it didn't pan out that way, at least not until the 360, which is a whole different story. But that said, one of those things was they tried pumping out a lot of demo discs for Japanese content. And I don't pretend to know where all of these came from. I'm assuming most of them were the pre-order bonuses, or they were just things you got as an extra. Like, one of the few games that did really well over in Japan for the original Xbox was Dead or Alive 3. In fact, there were people who bought the Xbox mostly just for that game. So I imagine if you went in Japan, bought the system, bought that game, they'd be like, oh yeah, here's a demo disc. And people are like, yeah, whatever, I don't really care. But they're polite, so they just take it, and then they hold on to it because they're Japanese and they don't want to, destroy anything until they eventually can resell it for just a little bit of value, which is very standard with Japan. Part of the reason that happens all the time, by the way, isn't so much that the culture mandates like keeping stuff in good condition. It's because they have garbage laws, basically meaning like, you know how if you're in the US or Canada or even parts of Europe, you'll notice this, you have public trash cans. That's actually very rare in Japan because you pay to have your garbage removed, like and it's like weighted and everything. So you're incentivized not to pollute, essentially. So when you buy something massive like an original Xbox, it's not in your interest to throw it away when you're done with it. Even if you don't want it, you hold on to it, you take good care of it, and eventually, even if the store like Hard Off will only give you like $5 for it, you just take that because it will literally cost you more to throw it away. Hence, most of the stuff stays in good condition. That said, there's a whole pile of these, and all of them are sealed. Now that's key here because I tried to do some research on these discs and I found no information. I've had a few of my buddies who are super into the original Xbox and I was like, Can you find any information on these? Were these dumped online? What is it? And nobody really had any answers. What I think happened is that, you know, occasionally they would give out these demo discs. The Japanese would just be like, oh, okay, thanks. And they would never open it because it wasn't a game they were interested in. They would set it aside because they didn't want to throw it away for garbage laws. And then when they decided to sell all their stuff, they're like, yeah, whatever. And then the store just takes it and just sits there because the Japanese have no interest in buying original Xbox stuff. So only Baka Gaijin, stupid foreigner, comes in and says, oh, I want that stuff. But as a result of that, I'm guessing it's very possible a lot of these have never been dumped online before. Not that they necessarily have any value to do that, but I'm curious if you guys think it's worth breaking the seal on all these, or if I should leave them sealed because they're sealed, you know? But let's go over it. We have Double Steel demo disc. This is known in the West as Yakuza, or Reckless the Yakuza missions, not to be confused with Sega's Yakuza franchise. It's basically a racing game with a lot of shooting and stuff like that. This is a demo for the Japanese version. Funny enough, there is a Japanese exclusive sequel to this game for the original Xbox that never came out here. This one I'm pretty sure is Steel Battalion, a demo for Steel Battalion, you know, the game with the big like pilot mech controller thing. Speaking of mechs and stuff, Phantom Crash. We got that game as well. This is probably the coolest one. Jet Set Radio Future. Yeah, if you're a Jet Set guy, this is kind of a cool one to see, right? Again, sealed. I don't really want to break a seal on something like this, but at the same time, like, it probably has never been dumped online. But the last one, though, probably the most bizarre. This is Xbox-ism Tokyo Game Show 2003 Premium Disc. This is completely sealed. At first, what I thought this was some sort of thing they were giving away at Tokyo Game Show 2003, which I guess technically it could be, but I doubt it because I'm pretty sure what it contains is a disc that is for the Xbox that has like demos and stuff on it, that all the demos that were playable at TGS 2003, but it also includes a DVD that seems to contain like footage of the event. So I find it impossible to believe that they would have given this away at the event and then somehow had footage of it because, you know, even if you're like, oh yeah, we filmed all of yesterday and we somehow pumped out a whole bunch of press discs and here you go the next day on Sunday. No, I don't see that. So I'm pretty sure this was given away sometime after TGS, but in what context, no idea. It's again sealed. I don't know if this has ever been dumped online or anything like that. Certainly not valuable. Like all of these were just like a couple bucks each. But I'm just like, you know, tell me, Xbox community, do these already exist? Have they been dumped online? Am I just missing it? What would you guys do in this situation? So just tell me things. All right, with that out of the way, because I thought those were pretty cool to pick up. We also got some games for just some, you know, random systems here. One of the systems that I like collecting for is the Neo Geo CD. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm going for a full set of Neo Geo CD because while it is not a big collection, you know, it's SNK made a disc-based console, disc-based alternative to their Neo Geo AES home console. It only had something like 80 games on it. And I have the vast majority, actually. But the handful that I don't, for the most part, we're not talking like $100. We're talking like thousands. Because those handful are just impossible. So I've been chipping away at that collection with no intent of ever saying I'm going for a full set. But it's one of those scenarios where we're like, well, you know, if one of them came along and accidentally was mispriced, a zero was chopped off or whatever, you know. So that said, I found a couple in Japan, and I thought, all right, these are within wheelhouse price range. I don't have them. Let's do this. So that would be Double Dragon. I'm not actually sure this is the same franchise or just using the name because it doesn't really look like your standard Double Dragon. I've never played this version, I'll be totally honest. But yeah, there's a iteration of Double Dragon on the Neo Geo CD, but it looks like more like a standard fighting game as opposed to when I think of Double Dragon, I think of like the NES game. This ain't that game. I'll tell you that right now. It's probably some variation of one of the Double Dragon sequels and then was just called Double Dragon, but I don't actually know that for sure. That said, cool to pick up. And then this was probably from a financial perspective the stupidest thing I picked up. Just because it was a Neo Geo CD game, obviously. It's a game that I already have on the Dreamcast, so I didn't actually really need it. I just got it because it was part of the Neo Geo CD collection. It wasn't cheap, but it also wasn't crazy expensive. It was like the scenario I was discussing before, where something that was expensive, but they haven't updated the prices. Now that I don't have to pay the tax on it, now that the yen has kind of tanked, this brings it into reason, but it's still expensive. That's where we're at. That would be Twinkle Star Sprites for the Neo Geo CD. That was one of those situations where if any part of you ever considers getting a full set, you're just going to have to eventually start hitting some of those heavy hitters. This was cheaper by a lot than it normally is, but it was expensive enough that I was like, you're an idiot. You're a bakagaijin. Don't do that. But I did it anyway. So, Twinkle Star Sprites for the Neo Geo CD, which definitely helped move the needle on the potential possibility of completing this set. Now, the last game, device, thing, whatever you want to say, before we get on to some consoles, if you watched my Hard Off Adventure video, there's a segment of that video where I basically go like, all right, guys, we just got out of the store and we saw this stupid thing that we couldn't believe. Store owner came over. He confirmed that it was this thing that we thought it was, blah, 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 blah. This is that item. So when I first saw this, it was behind glass, and none of us could figure out what this thing was. We looked at it. We thought it was a VHS tape. And we're like, that's really weird. Why is it in a glass case with video games if it's a VHS tape? And then we started trying to read the label, and it said it was a Famicom game, a.k.a. the Japanese version of the NES. And we're like, how is that a Famicom game? That's such a weird premise for a Famicom game. Started doing a little research. Seemed like it was the thing. Then my buddy Sebastian walks over, gets the guy who works at Hard Off, asks him to come over because he can speak Japanese, asks the guy, like, what is the deal with this? And the guy basically sat there, and he's like, oh, I'll pull it aside and do some research. Because he figured out I was a YouTuber, so Hard Off has been very encouraged now to embrace and support YouTubers who go in there. So like, oh, yes, sir, anything you need, let me help you, because they've realized the value of that. So the guy sat down, and he just did a whole bunch of homework on it and then pulled us to the side and basically explained what this is. So this is exactly what it's going to sound like. United States presidential election. Not United States, United State presidential election. And very topical at the moment, right? And I'm not trying to get political. It's just, you can't help it. It's literally what the game's premise is. So we did a little homework into it. It turns out is exactly what it describes itself as. This is a game where you have to decide. You decide, I'm going to run for president. You have to decide what party you're going to run for. You're going to decide what your political ambitions are. And you're going to see if you can beat the competition and become the president of the United States in 1988, which incidentally became George H.W. Bush, Bush 41. So, yeah, I was like, that's a game? And inside, the cart has the American flag with this weird version of an eagle. Like, it's exactly what it seems like it would be, the Japanese interpretation of the American election. There's some really out-of-date concepts in here, too. It's like you have to take up a position on how you feel against the Soviet Union, obviously out of date. And so it was just like, wow. And does your positions in the simulator get to the point where you're worthy of becoming president? Yeah, unfortunately, to my knowledge, this game is entirely in Japanese. I don't know if there's a fan alteration of this where it's been translated into English or anything like that, but I am a big history buff guy. In fact, on my travel channel, I do a lot of stuff about presidential American history. So the idea that there was a Famicom game about this, I was just like, okay, right on. Let's get that. That's weird. That's my kind of weird. That and demo discs, right? And things. So now, with that said, we got a couple of consoles. Let's talk about them. We'll do one lesser and then one that's the meat. All right, you guys ready? So here's console number one. This is the Epoch TV Vader in the box. This actually came from the same store as the United States presidential race. So what is this thing? Well, we'll take a look at it in a second. Basically, there's a company called Epoch, E-P-O-C-H, that made various game consoles in the first and second generation in Japan only. I think the one they're best known for is the Cassette Vision, which is a system, incidentally, I do not own. But like a lot of companies back then, they were trying to throw their hat in the ring at the first generation. Now I know it's an old joke on this channel at this point. Where is your first gen recap series? And what I've kind of said about that for the longest time is I could really only make like 2 videos out of that, because the entire generation was really just Pong clones. Like back then, we didn't really have the technology to make consoles with interchangeable games. You basically had to build the game into the hardware, and you could really only do one game. So with the exception of the Magnavox Odyssey, which had like little cards that, changed the game slightly enough to make it essentially 6 games, With the exception of that, pretty much every single console was a Pong clone. So while I could do one video with every Pong clone I've got, including Nintendo's own TV Game 6, the precursor to the Famicom, even that would just be one video. So I was like, eh. This, though, actually caught me by surprise, because it is a first-gen console that is not Pong. What is it? It's Space Invaders. So this machine, called the TV Vader, obviously meant to, you know, somewhat remind you of Star Wars, is just a physical machine of just Space Invaders, a first-gen console to do just that. And I was like, all right, you know what? This slightly moves the needle on the eventuality of a first-gen recap, because at least this would be separate from all of those, and we'd have a little bit more to talk about. There'd be a little bit more meat on the bone, as it were. And to be honest with you, this was in the junk section. This thing was like $6 or whatever, maybe $8 in the box, with the power cable, with the, like, you know, the RF cable, all that. It's oddly in pretty good shape, all things considered. So I was like, okay, that's kind of worth getting just for the stupidity. Will I ever realistically sit down and play this? No. But I'm also never going to use that either. So, but that said, whatever. That's cool. However, that was just kind of a weird happenstance. That was just something in the junk section. I was like, oh, that's cool. However, the last thing up here in this particular video, and keep in mind there will be a Suragaya video, and frankly I got way more stuff at Suragaya. The last thing I got at Hard Off, which ironically was actually the first thing I bought at any Hard Off, it was one of my white whales. Something I've wanted for a very long time. A very stupid thing to get, but something that had to be got. Ladies and gentlemen, and let's keep it real, there's probably no ladies watching. Gentlemen, because you guys know they would have tuned out at that point. Gentlemen watching this video, I present unto you the Casio PV1000, still in the wrap. I haven't even taken it out of that. Now, what is this thing? Okay, this requires a little bit of an explanation, and one day this will get its own dedicated video in the 3rd gen recap. It'll kind of be thrown back in there. Do you know Casio? We probably know them best for making like keyboards and watches and stuff like that. Casio, like any Japanese company, kind of tries their hand at everything, and then a few of those successes make their way overseas, and then we just kind of associate them with that one or two things. Casio has made a couple of attempts at video games. Now, I infamously did a video on the Casio Loopy. That was their most recent attempt at a game console, which was all the way back in like the 5th, I think it was a 5th gen console technically. The one that could print stickers and stuff, and that was aimed specifically at women, or little girls to be more accurate. Before that, they had actually made a console to compete against the Famicom, and technically the SG-1000. It was this. This is the PV-1000. Now, if you've never heard of this thing, don't feel bad. Most people haven't, including the Japanese. This only came out in Japan, and to my understanding, was recalled pretty much immediately upon its release. Similar to the way the Apple Pippin was recalled from North America pretty much immediately upon its release. Therefore, it's an extraordinarily rare machine to ever see or to find. Ironically, I'd actually seen a couple of the games over the course of time in Japan, but I never bothered to pick any up because I never thought there was any real chance of getting it. Well, much to my shock, there it was, just sitting at the Hard Off, wrapped up. This, I'm going to be honest with you, this cost me about $200. And for this machine, that's pretty good. So I was pretty happy about that. But yeah, the pain though, I don't have any games for it. There was only like 13 games ever released for him. I looked, man. I'm just going to be honest with you. After I got this, I really started looking for PV-1000 games. I don't care what game it is. I'll take any of them. Any game. Just to, like, first of all, just to see if it even functions. And I even did the desperate. I went down to Akihabara, a place I hate. And it doesn't matter why I hate it. That place sucks. Well, okay, honestly, it's because the video game sections there are usually really bad, and they're extremely overpriced. They're tourist prices. And you're kind of an idiot if you're going in there being like, oh, this is a good place to buy my Mario games. Don't do that. But it was the one place I could think of that might potentially have at least like one game sitting somewhere, is that it might be there, and it wasn't. I never found one. So that said, I don't actually know if this machine works. So yeah, there is actually a flash card for this thing. I reached out to the creator of it, and I'm yet to hear anything back. So, yeah, I don't know. If anybody out there has any PV1000 games they don't want, you know, let me know. But I want to do a video on this thing at some point, show it to you guys and all that. But yeah, it's got the original power supply, it's got the controller, etc. A spectacular failure of a video game console. But I like my obscure consoles. I like my obscure things, obviously. So, very happy to add that to the collection. Obviously, I'll take it out of the wrap and everything. The only reason I left it in there is because, like, until I have a game and I can really do anything else with it, there's not really any reason to separate it all. But, yeah, we'll do that eventually. But, yeah, that will do it for the hard-off pickups from July 2024. Keep in mind, there will be another one here with Suragaya, the whole adventure video, plus the pickups video on that. So, yeah. And, of course, more videos as always. So, if you guys could do me a favor, please like this video, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't done that before, as well as check out all the social media stuff in the description, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon, really appreciate the support over there, Spreadshirt, and my travel channel, which you can see all the Japanese adventures and stuff, by the way, if you're ever like, I kind of want to go to Japan, but I don't really know what to expect, I'm a little afraid, watch my videos. I go to all these places and I'm like, guys, here's everything you can expect, here's all the customs things works, blah, 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 blah. You'll be able to handle traveling. Trust me. Or join my Discord where we have tons of people in there from around the world where you can ask questions of. And if you can chat with me directly in there. It's the easiest way to get a hold of me. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all later.